In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Nothing was made without him. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it. The whole world is made through him, except the world doesn't recognize him. But there are others who do believe in him. They run to him from the fields and journey from far away, carrying only hope and curiosity. They didn't know where the road would lead or what others would think of them. But they believe in his name. And to these, he gives the right to become children of God. The Word became human, and he made his home among us, so we could see his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. God made known to us, not on a throne of power, but in a cradle of peace. Emmanuel, God with us.
I love that video. It summarizes Christmas in a really great way. And as we talk about this idea of Christmas type of Emmanuel, I was thinking about this because all of my life, I have grown up going to Christmas services and being in church and hearing the Christmas story. Right? It's very familiar, as I'm sure it is for most of you here. And it's funny, but as something is familiar, especially from your youth and your childhood, it's amazing as you get older, and I think of myself now at 47, the ways in which I feel like I'm just beginning to understand just how wonderful, how amazing, how interesting the story of Jesus' birth really is. That it's not just this event that happened 2,000 years ago, that it's cool and it's historical and it was real, but it's the implications even for our life today. Like, that's the significance of Christmas. It's not even a question of like what happened or when did it happen or did it really happen. It's far more significant is what does it actually mean? And what does it mean for me and for my own life? And so much of it, I love it, goes right back to that word that just ended with that word Emmanuel. And Matthew kind of tells a little bit about the story behind this when it talks about Jesus' birth, and he means everything from the virgin birth and the inception, as well as the angels and the visiting of Joseph. He says this, all of this occurred to fulfill the Lord's message through his prophet. And he means the prophet Isaiah, 500 years before Jesus, who talked about all this. He said, look, the virgin will conceive a child, and she will give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God is with us. Now think about those words for just a second. God is with us. Like there's an interesting component here because we all have kind of a different reaction to this idea. And there's two really main reactions to this idea of God being with us. One, you may come from the standpoint of the idea of like, well, you know what? God is a loving God, and I accept that he's kind of everywhere, and he's always with us, and he's a part of our life. And so the idea of God being with us is like, yeah, a given. And others of you might come from a background where you're more skeptical. You might not even be sure there is a God, let alone a God that is near. Or you have a faith background, but frankly, you're not sure that God really listens to you or hears your prayers or feels very close. And not exactly sure what we're supposed to do with this idea that God is with us. But what's really interesting is this idea in a biblical sense of the biblical God. The God who is infinitely large, who fills heaven and earth, who actually created this universe and exists even beyond its borders and boundaries. It's this massive God who spoke it all and holds it all in his own power, in his own wisdom, and his own knowledge, that it's this God who has stepped into our world and feels like it's worth telling people something different has just happened. Something unique to this moment in time in life, and unique to this world, and unique to human experience of interacting with God. Something unique has happened in this time and in this place, in this space. That God has stepped in and entered into a unique way. And so I think this is so cool, but we're going to just spend a couple of minutes just looking at this idea of Emmanuel. Right? There's just three really basic things right there on kind of the nose of it, but one is that this child who was born is God, is that biblical God, is that infinite God. Like, that's an amazing thing. He's God, but he's now a human. He's now condensed down into this little life with these finite boundaries and a finite timeline. Who's going to live, who's going to have to grow, who's going to have to learn. That how can an infinitely big God come into this kind of little tiny finite space in person? And yet that's the picture. That's saying, well, this is what God has done. This is a really crazy idea. And yet here he is. This God who made us, this God who fills this universe is now here, present with us in a way in which we can understand and get to know him a little more. That this idea of how God has come down or how God is with us is this incredible demonstration of the very greatness of God. But we can't really fully understand the greatness of an infinite God, can we? And we're finite people. I mean, even the best and the brightest of you and the smartest out there with your awesome brains that God has given you can't wrap your head fully around the vastness of this universe, let alone the infinite God who's bigger and greater than it. And it is an awesome thing because while we can't understand God's greatness, he brings himself down to our level in this act of Emmanuel. In this act of Christmas, in his act of being born as a child, he steps into our world into a way that we can begin to understand and wrap our finite minds around this incredible God. I mean, think of it this way. You've probably had a teacher at some point in your life who was one of your favorites, who was a really good teacher. And they just had a way of explaining these concepts of school that were difficult. And yet they managed to bring them down to your level and make them understandable. And the further you've gone in education, you get to the point where you have doctors who have these PhDs who are brilliant, and they have these ginormous minds, and they're able to understand very difficult concepts, and yet, so often, they are able to bring these difficult things down to the level of those of us who are novices, who are learning, who are freshmen, even beginning. And you can have two teachers, and both of them can be equally brilliant, and yet only one necessarily is great enough to actually be a teacher to bring it down to your level, because they can be brilliant and not be able to explain it to morons like me. Right? That's a thing. Many math teachers have tried. But not many have succeeded. But this is a fascinating piece of the greatness of God. It's his ability to become small. It's his ability to become one of the least or the lesser type of people. It's his ability to become human and knowable. I mean, think of it this way maybe. Think of it how there are people that you might think of in your life that are wise. They have wisdom. They understand life. They seem to know how to make good choices. When difficult circumstances show up, they don't seem to break a sweat knowing how to navigate it. And you know what's really cool about people who have wisdom is that they can recognize and they can understand foolishness. Generally because they've been there. They've lived there. They've made the mistakes. They've done the foolish things. They can look backward and go like, oh yeah, I've already made that bad decision, so now I can make a good decision. They've got wisdom, but you know what? People who are on the level of life who are foolish don't understand wisdom. Can't understand what the wise are doing. We can't understand why they're doing it. We can't understand how did they know that, right? Because when you're on the lesser level, you can't understand the greater, but the greater can understand the lesser. Or take it from this standpoint, people who have learned the value of being selfless, of giving, of serving other people, of extending themselves for the benefit of others, who have found that satisfaction, who have found that greatness, can understand what it is to be selfish. Selfish still calls their name all the time. But a person who is only selfish, who has never come to understand the value of giving of themselves, of their time, their effort, their resources, to others who will never be able to pay them back, cannot understand the behavior or the actions of a selfless person. It's a greater position. And it is this cool picture of Christmas that we have a God who is so great, he's able to bring himself down to the level of the people that he understands and that he loves. Because he can understand us even when we cannot understand him. And I love this picture out of Isaiah. That he does this by sending this son, this child. It says, a child is born to us. A son is given to us. And the government will rest on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. This is one of those things that we hear it again at Christmas, and it's easy to miss it, but there's a lot here. But just look at that one little word in yellow there, given. That there is a son who is given to us. Like this is, if you will, the very first reference to the gift of Christmas. That the giving aspect, the generosity behind this whole thing. I mean, think about what you're going to do tonight and tomorrow. Think about what has been driving our economy for the last month and a half, 2 months, 3 months, maybe 4 months. Gifts, buying gifts, giving gifts, exchanging gifts. Right? This idea of gifting gifts to other people, even people when basically we're just swapping like $20 bills with each other. But the whole thing is built around this idea of we want to give gifts. We celebrate this holiday by giving gifts, even if we've forgotten or our culture has forgotten there's any reference to Jesus or to God or anything spiritual. Yet it is pervasive, and it is amazing to think back of how all of this begins with God as the original gift giver. Like that's what he's saying here, that there's going to be a gift given to you because you need this gift. That God, as he looks at our world and as he looks at us as people, he says, you guys need something. There's some things broken. There's some things wrong in this world, and you need something. And the gift I'm going to give you to satisfy that need in your lives is going to be the very gift of my son. That's a radical gift, and it's really interesting that gifts they communicate a lot of things, don't they? We give gifts to communicate the fact that we care for people, that we love them, that they're a part of our family, and that we have to get them a gift. All kinds of aspects, right, of our gift giving is part of it, but it's interesting that some gifts have a certain message that come with them. And you can't miss that message oftentimes. In fact, it can affect how you take a message. I mean, if all of you as part of Bayside got together and started giving me books saying how to be a better pastor, it would be a really nice gift, probably. But it would be hard to take that as not as a subtle hint that's not so subtle. How to preach shorter sermons effectively. These could be things that would be beneficial, perhaps, but at the same time, hard to take it without a little like, ooh, that hurts. Right? There's lots of little things like that in our life that they communicate. And this is what's so interesting about this idea of Christmas. That the gift that God gives us is his son, but this communicates something about us and about who we are and what we need. I like the way the pastor Timothy Keller puts this. He said, there's never been a gift offered that makes you swallow your pride to the depths that the gift of Jesus Christ requires us to do. Christmas means that we are so lost, so unable to save ourselves, that nothing less than the death of the Son of God himself could save us. That means that you are not somebody who can pull yourself together and live a moral and good life. Like that's a very loaded gift on God's part. To say that I see a world that is in need, that is hurting, that is lost, that is so broken that it's going to take me sending my son, who will be born as a human being so that he can represent human nature, to deal with what God sees from God's perspective, this infinite and great God, what he sees as yours and my biggest problem. What the Bible calls sin, but what is really described as this brokenness in our relationship to God. That we live as the God of our own lives, that we do what we want, the way that we want, and we do it when we want. And it makes us into a little bit of a mess. In fact, the picture, the symbolism of this in the Christmas story is always the picture of darkness. That it's into a dark world that the light of the world has come. I mean, it's why we've got flashlights here, which we're going to get to later tonight. It's why we've got Christmas lights. It's why we celebrate Christmas at the darkest time of the year. I mean, there's this vivid picture to that Jesus came into a land that was in the midst of experiencing great darkness, but it's not really an external darkness that he's talking about. He's talking about the darkness that's actually inside of us, that's inside of our hearts, that comes out of us in terms of how our words that we speak to people that we love. It's things that come out of us in terms of just our attitudes and our actions and our behaviors. It's the feelings that we never let outside. It might be the depression or the despair that is inside of us that we can't seem to control or shake. It might be the anxiety or worry about the things of the future that we can't seem to control. It might be the resentment and the anger that just exists from hurts in the past that we've never been able to forgive or let go of. That then cause us to multiply resentments and hurts around us. It may just be that nagging sense that no matter how many great things we do, how many great things we succeed at, how many beautiful things we do for our family, that all of it has this vague, unfortunate sense of being kind of meaningless. That it just doesn't last. It just doesn't add up. It fades away so quickly, only needing to be replaced by more effort. That we feel like we're just sometimes on that, just spinning around like a rat in a cage, running on that wheel. And we just have to keep up and keep up and keep up. And there's just no let up. And there's just this sense, as long as we stay busy, we stay distracted, we stay away from silence or quiet, we can kind of ignore these things. But God looks at us and says, there is just all kinds of this darkness inside of our hearts. And the only solution to it is for me to send my son down to earth. Because you can't generate your own light to eradicate this kind of darkness. I mean, that's the great thing about darkness. Darkness is really easy to deal with, isn't it? Just turn on a light. Darkness doesn't fight back. Like it never puts the lights out. It just goes away. But you have to have light to be able to do it. And the story of God throughout Scripture is realizing that people are never going to be able to be good enough, never going to be able to solve it. They're not going to be able to go to enough counseling. The government's not going to be able to have a program that fixes and resolves this and changes human behavior and human hearts, that the depths of what is wrong with us is just way too deep and way too dark. And Jesus says that he comes as the very source of what we need, the very source of light. He puts it this way. He says, I am the light of the world. If you follow me, you won't have to walk in darkness because you will have the light that leads to life. And this is a fascinating thing. He doesn't say you need light, and I'm going to tell you how to get light. I'm going to tell you where to go for it. I'm going to tell you how to behave. I'll tell you how to be good enough. I'll tell you how to eradicate this. He says, I am the light. That what you need is me. That this gift of God is that you actually need him. You need the person. You need the relationship. You need the connection with God himself, with the Son of God himself. But this is awesome good news. In fact, it's good news, and notice it's not good advice. Good advice would be, here's what you got to do. If you just do this, you just do this, you just do this, you add these things up in your life, and you can arrive at this place where you're going to accomplish this. But he's saying this is news, meaning it's already been done. It's going to be done. It's already happened. Just reporting what God is going to do, what God has already done for your life. He's saying this is what makes this such good news. I'm just informing you. All that needs to be done is there. All that needs to be provided is provided. I mean, how great is that when you show up at Christmas Eve and find out everything's already been done? You don't even have to help set the table. All the mothers are really excited about that as a concept. Jesus has made all of this available to us, this light that we need, this ability to change and reach into the depths of our heart and our lives. He's done it. He's made it all happen for us. This is Christmas. This is the celebration. This is the nativity. This is Emmanuel. This is God with us. He is saying what you need, the answer to that thing driving us to figure out this own darkness, this own frustration, this hurt, this pain, this history, this past, is Jesus himself. In essence, what he's saying is that, you know what, there's hope. That he's come as an offering, as a gift to bring us hope. Hope that we can't have or find through any of our own self-effort. It's simply there to receive it as a gift. But it is a gift that requires the courage to receive it, to take it, because when you receive the gift of light, when you receive the gift of coming to God himself, you got to realize that once you turn your life over to his light, you realize you're not in control. He's not a God that you can manipulate. He's not a God that you can get to do what you want to do. It becomes this question of, man, what does God want from me? How do I receive what he's offering? It's a gift, but it is a life-changing gift. And if we're honest with ourselves, change is not something that comes very natural or easy to us, especially when it's not within our control and when it's being done around us, when it's being offered to us. But I love this picture because there's just a truth. If you look through the story, and even the Christmas story of Mary, you look at Joseph, you look at what they chose as they believed God, it is a story that demonstrates an incredible amount of courage. Because it wasn't a story for them. They're living this faith out. They're following and trusting God where he's going to take them, and it's not clear where it's going to go. But they believe in his promises, and it's in him that they keep finding hope. And that is the same promise for us. That's the reality for today. It's not that Jesus came. It's not just that he died on the cross for our sins. It's that he right now wants to bring this same hope and this same light into every single one of our lives. But the reality is, to receive something like this, honestly, it's a little bit like getting to the place where really we have no other alternative. That many of us are kind of like an alcoholic. We've got a problem and everybody knows it except for us. We've got a wonderful ability to be in denial. We've got a wonderful ability to say we've got it managed. We've got a wonderful ability to say, like, I can figure this out and do it on my own. And we have this amazing ability to ignore the fact that everyone around us is saying something to the contrary because we don't want to accept the fact that we can't be in control. Or we may just be one of the persons that has been looking for God and looking for this all through our life and trying to find hope, and we've just been looking in all the wrong places. But either way, what is awesome about Christmas, it is the reminder that when we come to that place where we finally decide we want to lay down the control of our life, that God is there ready for us. And tonight, I don't know, but there may be a few of you that you are at that point and place in your life where you are recognizing you want an answer to the darkness. You want an answer to the sin. You want an answer to the hopelessness of this world. You want an answer to the rat race you've been running on. That you want a solution that is bigger and greater than all the other aspects of this world and this life that you've been looking for. And so we're just going to close down this part of the service and just give you guys an opportunity to take that step if it's one that you want. So let us all just bow our heads for a moment and we're going to pray. And if you are at that place where you would like to say to Jesus, I want you to be the light in my life. I want your forgiveness for my sin. Then I would encourage you just to talk to him. Talk to him is just what prayer is. I'm going to pray a prayer out loud. You can pray this one silently in your own heart if you would like to, just to give you words of how to begin. But pray something like this. God, my Father, thank you for Christmas, that you sent your Son to earth for me. Thank you that you have offered to be here and in my life despite this darkness. Father, I'm tired of the darkness. I'm tired of the sin. I'm tired of trying to do this on my own, and I'm asking you to come into my life. I'm asking you to be the God of my life. And I'm saying that I want to follow you. And I pray this now in the name of Jesus. Amen. You go ahead and keep your heads down just for a second, your eyes closed. I want to give one offer. If that is you this evening that prayed that prayer, while everybody else has got their head bowed and their eyes closed, I'm not going to ask you to do anything else, but just to take a step and a moment of courage, just to look up at me and to raise your hand and say, I prayed that with you tonight, Cory. I took that step towards God, towards Jesus. I want to make that step, and I did it. Awesome. If there's anybody else this evening, you're not alone. Taking that step. I see you. Awesome. Gotcha. Love it. You guys, this is such an exciting moment. If this is you and you're at that place where you're taking that step, I just want to encourage you with this. And that is, don't do faith alone. Don't try to follow Jesus alone, but understand that that's the whole point of what church is that it's a group of people who are all following after Jesus together. And if you're in Woodland, then come and be a part of Bayside. We'd love to have you. If you're not from around here, find a church that loves Jesus and is doing life together as well. Go ahead and lift your heads up. Put your hands together for people who are making this decision this evening. It's awesome. We also have Bibles in the back. I encourage you to take one if you don't already have one. They're open to anybody. But that is an awesome, awesome moment, beginning to follow after Jesus in that way. All right, you guys, we are at the place where I need you to pull out your flashlights, your fancy, fancy flashlights. Now, traditionally, we call this a Christmas Eve candle lighting service. But we can't do candles in here, which is unfortunate because real fire is dangerous and therefore fun. And clearly the school doesn't want us to burn this place down, which I kind of understand. So we have opted for flashlights, and we could have gone electric candles and just give them to you and have them give us back for the sake of ambiance. But let me just tell you what I love about these flashlights and why we choose this. It is simply this, because you get to take these with you. And that is the point of the Christmas story, is that God invaded this dark world, invaded dark lives so that he could light them up. And then we live those lights out in the world, which still needs to see who Jesus is. And so I like the picture that when you leave here, you're going to take these flashlights with you, which means, you're going to go home some night and your family turned all the outside lights off and you're like, I can't see the key. And then all of a sudden you're going to be like, bam, look at that. There's the keyhole right there. Perfect. Right? You drop something in your car in the middle of the night and all of a sudden, boom, there's your light, because it's the beautiful picture of God is your light and he is going to be with you every day from here forward. How awesome is that? It's pretty awesome. It's pretty awesome. All right, well, can we guys go ahead and take your lights out? Can we turn these lights down a little bit? Perfect, do that. We just want to have a little bit of fun in the dark here for a second. And so let me just do this. I'm going to ask you just to kind of turn your lights on in a moment, but let's start with this. If you guys are a Christmas Eve celebration family, I mean, you do open all your Christmas gifts tonight, you do your big family gathering on Christmas Eve, just turn your light on and hold it up for me. Let's see the Christmas Eve celebrators. Oh yeah, there's a few of us in the room. It's good, it's good. I like it, you're doing it a good way. Okay, go ahead and turn those off. If you're a Christmas Day person, you're like, boom, Christmas Day is the big presents, it's the big meal, right? It's the family gathering. Oh, look at that. There's a lot of you guys in the room right there. I love it. All right, if you're a double dipper and you do both, like we do, we're like, why celebrate once when you can celebrate twice? That's good. That's good. I love it. Excellent. Excellent. Okay. All right, let me just get to everybody. Everybody just got your flashlight on. Give it up there. Notice this. This is what's so cool. In a dark room, right? It's amazing how when you turn the lights off, how much we lose our orientation. But when you have these incredible group of lights, it's a group dynamic, right? It's all the lights that fill this room up. All these lights that make it come a little bit more alive and bright. And I love it because it's just this picture of what God has done, not just with one or with two of us, but with his people. That we get to live these lights in the darkness. So hold your light up real high. Look at that. It's beautiful. It looks like a starry night from up here. Now go ahead and just turn them all off for a second. Go ahead, turn them all off. There you go. We have kids in the room, so they must not work that well. Count to three, just turn them all back on. 1, 2, 3. Isn't that cool? It looks really cool from up here. Next year, I'm going to teach you guys in constellation format. It looks awesome. We're going to close by just singing Silent Night. And as we do it, keep your light on. If you can keep your arm up the whole time, we'll be really impressed. Give it a little sway, but go ahead and stand up with us. And let's close out our time just by worshiping Jesus with this great song.